She signed a contract to save her mother's life. He offered a fortune to protect his empire. But on their wedding night, the billionaire slid an envelope under her door and disappeared into the shadows of Coldwater Tower. Inside, a single promise that would shatter everything Nola Grayson thought she understood about their arrangement: I will never touch you unless you ask. What starts as a cold transaction in Chicago's most ruthless boardroom becomes a dangerous game of secrets, survival, and forbidden desire. When the past refuses to stay buried and enemies close in from the inside, Nola and Alistair must decide if a marriage built on lies can become the only truth worth fighting for. This is a story about choosing love when the contract ends, about finding warmth in the coldest tower, and discovering that sometimes the most binding agreements are the ones written on our hearts. If you love billionaire romances with depth, emotion, and twists that'll leave you breathless, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what happens next. The cathedral doors closed behind them with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Nola Grayson stood in the marble foyer of Coldwater Tower's penthouse, still wearing her wedding dress, a creation of silk and lace that cost more than 3 years of her salary. The dress felt like a costume. Everything about today felt like a performance she hadn't properly rehearsed. Her new husband stood 20 feet away, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. Alistair Coldwater hadn't said a word since they left the reception. He'd barely looked at her during the ceremony. When the officiant announced he could kiss his bride, Alistair had pressed his lips to her forehead with all the warmth of a doctor administering medicine. Nola's hands trembled as she reached for the zipper at her back. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading and mentally preparing for since she signed those papers in Bexley Rowe's downtown office. She'd read the contract 3 times, highlighting the clause that said, no physical obligation, but she wasn't naive. Men like Alistair Coldwater didn't marry women like her without expectations. The master suite is to your left, Alistair said without turning around. His voice carried that same detached quality she'd heard in their only 2 previous conversations. Your belongings have been arranged according to the preferences you listed. Nola blinked. I didn't list any preferences. Then according to what seemed logical. He adjusted his cufflinks, still facing the window. There's a bath drawn. I assumed you'd want to wash off the day. Something in his phrasing made her chest tighten. Wash off the day. As if their wedding was something dirty to be scrubbed away. What about you? The question escaped before she could stop it. Alistair's shoulders stiffened. For the first time since they entered the penthouse, he turned to face her. His features were sharp enough to cut glass, all hard angles and controlled expressions. His eyes, an unusual shade of gray-blue, swept over her face without really seeing her. I have work to attend to, he said. The merger with Halstead Tech requires immediate attention. I'll be in my private office on the 42nd floor. On our wedding night. Yes. The single word hung between them like a challenge. Nola felt something hot and sharp rise in her throat. She'd sold a year of her life for this. She'd stood in front of 300 strangers and promised to love this man, had smiled for photographers and pretended her heart wasn't breaking under the weight of what she'd become. And he was going to work. Of course, she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Don't let me keep you from your spreadsheets. Something flickered across Alistair's face, too quick to identify. He nodded once, then walked toward the elevator that accessed his private floors. His hand was on the button when he paused. Nola. It was the first time he'd said her name directly. The sound of it in his precise, controlled voice did strange things to her pulse. There's an envelope on your nightstand. Read it when you're alone. Then he was gone, the elevator doors closing on whatever explanation might have followed. Nola stood in the vast, empty penthouse for a full minute before her legs remembered how to move. She kicked off the designer heels that had blistered her feet during the reception and walked barefoot across marble that probably cost more per square foot than her mother's monthly care facility bill. The master suite was less a bedroom and more a luxury hotel wing. The bed could sleep 6 people comfortably. Abstract art that Nola suspected was worth a fortune hung on walls painted in soft grays and blues. Through another doorway, she glimpsed the promised bath, steam still rising from water scattered with rose petals. Rose petals. Someone had put rose petals in her bath on her wedding night while her husband fled to his office. The envelope sat on the nightstand exactly where Alistair said it would be. Thick cream paper, her name written in black ink with precise, angular handwriting. Nola's hands shook as she picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a black credit card with her name embossed in silver. The letter was brief. Nola. This marriage is a legal arrangement designed to protect us both. You have fulfilled your obligation by standing beside me today. I will never ask anything more of you. I will never touch you unless you explicitly ask me to. I will never enter your private spaces without permission. I will never treat you as property, obligation, or possession. The card has no limit. Use it as you see fit. The penthouse is yours. The 47th floor has been prepared exclusively for your use and is accessible only by your biometric signature. Everything there belongs to you, regardless of what happens between us. You are safe here. That is my only promise, and the only one that matters. Alistair. Nola read it twice, then a third time. Her throat burned. Her eyes stung. She told herself it was relief she felt, not disappointment. This was good. This was what she'd wanted. A business arrangement with clear boundaries and no messy emotional entanglements. So why did she feel so utterly, devastatingly alone? She set the letter down carefully and walked to the windows. Chicago sprawled below her, a galaxy of lights in the November darkness. Somewhere in this city, her mother slept in a clean bed in a facility that Nola could finally afford. The eviction notice that had been taped to her apartment door 3 weeks ago was a memory. The collection agency calls had stopped. She'd done what she needed to do. But the price was standing in a penthouse worth more than some country's GDP, wearing a wedding dress that cost 6 months of rent, married to a man who couldn't look at her without flinching. Nola pressed her forehead against the cool glass and let herself feel it. All of it. The grief, the shame, the crushing weight of being bought and paid for like a commodity. She'd told herself she was strong enough for this. That she could separate emotion from transaction. That love was a luxury she couldn't afford anyway. She'd been lying. The bath water had gone cold by the time Nola finally moved. She drained it without getting in, stripped off the wedding dress, and left it in a silk puddle on the bathroom floor. She found her own clothes in the massive walk-in closet, wedged between designer pieces still bearing tags. Wearing her own soft pajamas felt like reclaiming something small but vital. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion pulled her under anyway. When she woke, gray dawn light filtered through gauzy curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back, and with it, the hollow ache in her chest. A soft chime made her jump. A wall panel she hadn't noticed before lit up with a message: "Breakfast is available in the main dining room. Mr. Coldwater will not be joining you this morning." Of course he wouldn't. Nola showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater that felt defiant in this palace of luxury, and ventured out. The penthouse looked different in daylight. Less intimidating, more sterile. She found the dining room easily enough and stopped in the doorway. The table could seat 20. A full breakfast spread covered one end: pastries, fruit, coffee, juice, dishes she couldn't name. A single place setting waited for her, one lonely plate in an ocean of polished wood. "Good morning, Mrs. Coldwater." Nola spun. A woman in her 50s stood in the doorway to what must be the kitchen, wearing a crisp gray uniform and a professional smile. "I'm Helen, the house manager. Mr. Coldwater asked me to ensure you have everything you need." Is the breakfast selection acceptable? Mrs. Coldwater. The name felt like someone else's skin. It's fine. Thank you. Nola moved to the place setting, hyper-aware of Helen's presence. You don't need to stay. I can manage. Of course. I'll be in my office on the main floor if you require anything. Mr. Coldwater has meetings until 6 this evening, but he asked me to remind you that the 47th floor is ready for your inspection whenever you wish. The mysterious floor. Nola had almost forgotten. After Helen left, Nola picked at the breakfast without tasting it. The coffee was perfect. Everything was perfect. She hated it. She found the private elevator at the end of a hallway she hadn't explored the night before. The panel beside it had a biometric scanner. When she pressed her thumb to it, the elevator opened immediately. The 47th floor was nothing like the penthouse. Where Alistair's space was all cold marble and abstract art, this floor felt warm. Lived in. The main room had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves already half-filled with titles Nola recognized, books she'd mentioned loving in throwaway comments during her background check interviews. Soft rugs covered hardwood floors. A reading nook curved along the windows, piled with pillows in deep jewel tones. Original artwork hung on the walls, not famous pieces but vibrant paintings of Chicago neighborhoods, street scenes, the kind of art sold at local markets. A state-of-the-art kitchen occupied one corner, smaller and more intimate than the penthouse's formal space. Through an open door, she glimpsed a bedroom decorated in warm creams and golds, nothing like the cool blues below. It was perfect. It was exactly the kind of space Nola would have created if she had unlimited resources and freedom. That was what broke her. She sank onto the window seat and pressed her hands to her face. Alistair Coldwater was a stranger who couldn't stand to spend an evening with her, but somehow he'd built her a home. He'd researched her tastes, anticipated her needs, created this sanctuary and put it entirely in her name. You are safe here. The words from his letter echoed in her mind. What kind of man did this? What kind of person married someone they couldn't look at, then gave them everything except themselves? Nola's phone buzzed. Her mother's facility. Ms. Grayson? This is Nurse Patricia. I wanted to let you know your mother had a wonderful night. The new medication is working beautifully. She's asking for you. The relief was physical. I'll be there in an hour. Actually, there's a car waiting for you downstairs. Mr. Coldwater arranged it. He thought you might want to visit this morning. Of course he did. The man who wouldn't eat breakfast with her had arranged a car to take her to her mother. The facility was on the other side of Chicago. Marcus, her new driver, made polite conversation that Nola barely heard. Her mind kept circling back to the 47th floor, to the letter, to the man who'd built her a home and then disappeared into his tower. Her mother looked better than she had in months. The new facility, the better care, the medications they could finally afford, it showed. Rose Grayson sat up in bed, her smile bright despite the tubes and monitors. Look at you, Rose said, reaching for Nola's hand. My daughter, Mrs. Coldwater. I still can't believe it. Nola forced a smile. Her mother didn't know the truth. Couldn't know. The contract was clear on that point. How are you feeling, Mama? Better every day. This place is like a hotel. And the nurses say we won't have to worry about those awful bills anymore. Rose squeezed Nola's hand. Tell me about the wedding. Tell me everything. So Nola lied. She described the cathedral, the flowers, the dress. She talked about the reception and the cake and the carefully choreographed first dance. She left out the part where her husband couldn't meet her eyes, where he'd fled to his office, where she'd spent her wedding night alone in a palace that felt like a prison. And Alistair? Rose asked. Is he good to you? Nola thought about the letter. The 47th floor. The car waiting outside. Yes, she said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. He's very careful with me. She stayed until her mother got tired, then Marcus drove her back to Coldwater Tower. The penthouse was empty. Silent. Nola spent the afternoon exploring her new floor, finding more thoughtful details. The desk stocked with her preferred pens. The tea collection featuring every blend she'd ever mentioned enjoying. The closet filled with clothes in her exact size, casual and comfortable, nothing like the designer pieces downstairs. At 6:15, her wall panel chimed again. Mr. Coldwater will be dining in his private suite this evening. Helen has prepared dinner for you in your dining room if you wish, or she can bring something to your floor. Nola stared at the message. Day 2 of her marriage, and her husband was still avoiding her. She typed back, "Tell Mr. Coldwater I'd like to speak with him. Tonight." The response came 30 seconds later, "Mr. Coldwater will meet you in the main living room at 8 o'clock. 2 hours to prepare for a conversation with her own husband." Nola would have laughed if it didn't hurt so much. She changed into one of the new dresses from her floor, a simple navy piece that made her feel armored. At exactly 8, she took the elevator down to the penthouse. Alistair was already there, standing by the windows in a fresh suit. He'd showered recently, his dark hair was still damp. He turned when she entered, and for just a moment, something unguarded flashed across his face. "You wanted to speak with me," he said. "I saw the 47th floor. I hope it's acceptable." "It's perfect. You know it's perfect." Nola moved closer, watching him carefully. "How did you know what I'd like?" "Research. Background checks are quite thorough." Background checks don't tell you someone's favorite tea blend or what kind of art they respond to. Alistair's jaw tightened. "I'm observant. You haven't looked at me for more than 5 seconds at a time since we met." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Nola took another step. Alistair stepped back. "You can't even stand to be in the same room with me for a meal. What kind of marriage is this?" "The kind we agreed to. The kind outlined in the contract you signed." "The contract said nothing about you treating me like a contagious disease." Alistair's control cracked. "I'm protecting you." "From what?" "From me." The words came out harsh, almost angry. "From this life. From everything that comes with being associated with my name." Nola stopped moving. What happened to Lenora Voss? The name hit like a physical blow. Alistair went rigid, every muscle in his body locked. His face drained of color. "How do you know that name?" "I heard the board members mention her at the reception. When they thought I wasn't listening." Nola kept her voice gentle. "Who was she, Alistair?" For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. He didn't drink it, just held the glass like a lifeline. "Lenora was my fiancée. 5 years ago." "What happened to her?" "She died. On our wedding night." His voice was flat, reciting facts. "There was an attack. A car bomb meant for me. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time." Nola's breath caught. "Alistair. They never found who ordered it. The investigation went nowhere. Too many enemies, too many possibilities. My father had just died, I'd just taken over the company, there were a dozen factions that wanted me gone." "That's why you married me," Nola said slowly, pieces clicking into place. "You think it's going to happen again." "I know it's going to happen again." Alistair finally looked at her, really looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was staggering. "The threat started 6 months ago. Different methods, same message. Someone wants me vulnerable. Unstable. The board thinks I'm paranoid, that I'm using this marriage to maintain control. They're wrong. You married me because I'm expendable. No. The word came out fierce. I married you because you have no connections to my world. No family in the public eye, no friends in high society circles. You're invisible to the people who want to hurt me, which means you're safer than anyone else I could have chosen. That's insane logic. It's the only logic I have. Alistair set down his untouched scotch. Lenora died because everyone knew she mattered to me. Because I couldn't hide what I felt. I won't make that mistake again. Understanding crashed over Nola like cold water. That's why you won't look at me. Why you stay away. If I don't care about you, you can't be used against me. If I maintain distance, you remain irrelevant to my enemies. His voice was clinical, explaining a business strategy. 1 year. That's all this needs to be. Then you walk away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life, and I return to my controlled solitude. And if I don't want to be irrelevant? The question hung between them. Alistair's expression shattered and reformed in the space of a heartbeat. Then you're a fool, he said quietly. Nothing good comes from caring about me, Nola. Lenora learned that. You do well to remember it. He was at the elevator before Nola found her voice again. You can't control everything, Alistair. He stopped but didn't turn around. You can keep your distance and follow your rules and pretend we're strangers, Nola continued. But you already showed your hand. The 47th floor. The books and the tea and the art. You researched me. You cared enough to build me a home. So don't stand there and tell me I'm irrelevant when you've already proven I'm not. Alistair's shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I hired someone to research you. I approved purchases from a list. That's not caring, Nola. That's delegation. You're a terrible liar. The elevator opened. Alistair stepped inside, then paused with his hand on the door. For what it's worth, he said, I wish I were better at it. For both our sakes. The doors closed. Nola stood alone in the vast living room, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She'd learned more in the last 10 minutes than in all her previous interactions with Alistair Coldwater combined. And every answer had just spawned a dozen new questions. She pulled out her phone and did what she should have done weeks ago. She searched for Lenora Voss. The articles made her blood run cold. 5 years ago, almost to the day. A car bomb outside Coldwater Tower. 1 fatality. The investigation had gone nowhere, officially unsolved. The media had speculated about corporate espionage, international competitors, even organized crime. But it was the photos that gutted her. Lenora had been beautiful, blonde and elegant, the kind of woman who belonged on Alistair's arm. And in every photo of them together, Alistair looked different. Younger. Open. Almost happy. He'd loved her. Truly loved her. And he'd watched her die because of it. No wonder he kept his distance. No wonder he couldn't look at Nola without flinching. She wasn't just his contract wife. She was a ghost, a replacement, a walking reminder of everything he'd lost. The realization should have made her angry. Instead, it broke her heart. The next week passed in a strange, isolating rhythm. Nola woke alone, ate alone, spent her days visiting her mother or exploring Chicago with Marcus as her silent escort. Alistair was a phantom presence, communicating through wall panel messages and Helen's carefully worded updates. He worked late. He had meetings. He was traveling to New York. To Seattle. To London. He was running, and they both knew it. Nola tried to settle into her new life. She met with lawyers who explained the trust funds now in her name, the accounts she controlled, the property deeds bearing her signature. She was wealthy beyond anything she'd imagined, and it felt hollow. Her mother was thriving, at least. That was something. Rose's color improved daily. She laughed more. The doctors were optimistic about her long-term prognosis. When Nola visited, she could almost believe the sacrifice was worth it. Almost. 10 days after the wedding, Nola was reading in her floor's window seat when her panel chimed with an unfamiliar alert. Security breach detected. Lockdown initiated. Please remain in your current location. Her heart lurched. She moved to the windows, looking down at the street 47 floors below. Police cars surrounded the building's entrance. Red and blue lights flashed against the November darkness. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Nola Grayson? A woman's voice, professional and cold. It's Nola Coldwater now, she said automatically, then felt stupid. This is Bexley Row. There's been an incident. I need you to listen very carefully. Bexley. The lawyer who'd arranged everything. Nola's grip tightened on her phone. What kind of incident? The less you know, the better. Stay on your floor. Don't answer your door for anyone except Alistair or security personnel who can verify their identity through the biometric system. Is Alistair okay? A pause. He's handling the situation. Just stay where you are. The line went dead. Nola spent the next 2 hours pacing her floor, checking her phone obsessively, watching the police activity below. Her mind conjured terrible scenarios. Another bomb. An attack. Alistair hurt or worse. When the elevator finally chimed, she nearly jumped out of her skin. The doors opened on Alistair, flanked by 2 security guards in tactical gear. He looked disheveled in a way she'd never seen, his shirt untucked, his tie gone, a dark smudge on his collar that might have been blood. Leave us, he told the guards. They hesitated. Alistair's glare could have frozen steel. Leave us. The guards retreated to the elevator. The doors closed. Alistair and Nola stared at each other across the suddenly too small space. Are you hurt? She asked. No. Is that blood? Not mine. Alistair. Someone broke into the building tonight. His voice was mechanical, reporting facts. They made it to the 45th floor before security intercepted them. They had blueprints of the tower. Photos. Including photos of you. The floor seemed to tilt. Photos of me? From the wedding. From your visits to your mother. From you entering this building. Alistair moved closer, and for the first time since their wedding night, he didn't maintain his careful distance. They knew exactly which floor was yours. They knew your security codes. They were coming for you, Nola. Why? Because I was stupid. His control was fracturing, anger and fear bleeding through. I thought I could keep you separate. I thought if I stayed away, if I maintained distance, no one would know you mattered. I was wrong. You don't know that I matter. Don't I? Alistair laughed, a harsh sound. I've redirected 3 meetings this week because they conflicted with your mother's physical therapy schedule. I had Marcus trained in evasive driving and background checked 6 different times. I review the security footage from this floor every night to make sure you're safe. I know your schedule better than my own because I can't stop myself from tracking every moment you're outside this building. Nola's breath caught. Alistair. You were supposed to be irrelevant, he continued, his voice breaking. You were supposed to be a legal solution to a corporate problem. You were supposed to be nothing. And instead? He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands came up to frame her face, not quite touching, hovering just at the edges of contact. His eyes were wild, desperate. Instead, I think about you constantly. I dream about you. I know you drink your tea too hot and you listen to old jazz when you read and you have a scar on your right knee from falling off a bike when you were 7. I know you cry when you think no one's watching and you smile at strangers and you're too kind for this world I've dragged you into. I know everything, Nola, and it terrifies me because the last time I cared this much, she died. Nola's hands covered his where they hovered near her face. She pressed them to her skin, making the contact real. I'm not Lenora. I know. And I'm not going to die because you care about me. You can't promise that. Neither can you. You can't control everything. Nola held his gaze, refusing to let him look away. You've been trying to protect me by pushing me away, but you just proved it doesn't work. They already know I'm here. They already know I matter. Hiding from me won't change that. Alistair's forehead dropped to hers, his breath shaky. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. I don't know how to care about someone and not destroy them. Then we figure it out together. If something happens to you. If something happens to me, it won't be because you loved me. It'll be because terrible people do terrible things. Nola's thumbs traced circles on his wrists. You can't prevent that by staying away. You can only make us both miserable trying. For a long moment, they stood like that, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. Then Alistair made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. You're supposed to be a contract, he said. Contracts can be renegotiated. Nola. Ask me, she said softly. Ask you what? You said you'd never touch me unless I asked. But I'm asking you to ask me. Ask me to choose this. To choose you. Not because of money or security or contracts, but because I want to. Alistair pulled back just enough to search her face. His eyes were wet. Why would you want this? Any of this? Because you built me a home and filled it with my favorite books. Because you arrange your schedule around my mother's therapy. Because you're so busy trying to protect me that you haven't noticed I might want to protect you too. Nola smiled through her own tears. Because somewhere in the last 2 weeks, I stopped thinking of this as an arrangement and started thinking of it as a marriage. And I think maybe you did too. I did, he admitted. I have been. Since the moment I saw your file and read about how you worked 3 jobs to pay for your mother's care. Since I learned you'd given up your graduate program to become a caretaker. Since I realized you were strong and brave and too good for someone like me. That's not your decision to make. Nola. Ask me, Alistair. He took a shaky breath. His hands were still cupped around her face, his touch gentle despite the tremor in his fingers. Will you let me try? He asked. To be a real husband. To care about you without destroying everything. To build something that isn't based on fear and distance. Yes, Nola said. On one condition. Anything. You have to let me try too. To be a real wife. To care about you. To share this burden you've been carrying alone for 5 years. Alistair's answer came in the form of a kiss, tentative and careful and full of 5 years of grief finally allowing itself to hope again. Nola kissed him back, pouring everything she'd been holding into it. All her fear and loneliness and growing affection for this broken, brilliant man who'd tried so hard to save her by pushing her away. When they finally broke apart, both were crying. I'm still terrified, Alistair admitted. Me too. I don't know if I can keep you safe. I don't know if I can handle your world. We're a disaster. Probably. Alistair laughed, a real laugh, and it transformed his face. The board is going to think I've lost my mind. Haven't you? Completely. The moment I signed that contract with you. Nola pulled him toward the couch, and this time he came willingly. They sat curled together, talking until dawn lightened the windows. Alistair told her about Lenora, really told her, sharing the grief he'd locked away. Nola talked about her father's abandonment, her mother's illness, the crushing weight of trying to hold everything together alone. They talked about the security breach, the investigation, the measures being taken. Bexley had suspects. The police were involved. It would take time, but they'd find whoever was targeting Alistair. "I should move you somewhere safer," Alistair said as the sun rose. "A secure location outside the city." "No. Nola. I'm not running. I'm not hiding. If we're doing this, really doing this, then we face it together." Alistair studied her face in the golden morning light. "You're sure? Are you? I've never been more terrified or more certain of anything in my life." Nola kissed him again, softer this time. "Then I guess we're doing this. I guess we are." They fell asleep on the couch, wrapped around each other, as Chicago woke up around them. It wasn't the wedding night either of them had planned. It was better. It was real. When Helen found them hours later, she simply smiled and draped a blanket over them before quietly retreating. The next weeks were a revelation. Alistair moved out of his fortress of an office and into the spaces they shared. They had breakfast together. Dinner together. They talked about everything and nothing. He introduced her to his work, explaining the intricate web of his business empire. She introduced him to her mother, and Rose Grayson charmed him completely within 5 minutes. The investigation progressed. Suspects were questioned. Security was tripled. There were setbacks and scares, but they faced them together. And slowly, carefully, they fell in love. Not the desperate, consuming love of youth, but something deeper. Built on honesty and shared vulnerability and the conscious choice to trust each other despite every reason not to. 11 months after their wedding, the police made an arrest. Bexley Rowe, the lawyer who'd arranged everything, had been orchestrating the threats. She'd been involved in Lenora's death too, working with a bored faction that wanted Alistair gone. The marriage was supposed to end like the first one, with tragedy that would break him completely. But Nola wasn't Lenora. And Alistair wasn't the same broken man he'd been 5 years ago. They testified together. Watched Bexley get escorted away in handcuffs. Held each other through the aftermath. When the 1-year anniversary of their contract arrived, Alistair presented Nola with divorce papers, exactly as promised. And Nola tore them in half. "What are you doing?" Alistair asked, though his smile suggested he knew. "Renegotiating." "To what terms?" "No contract. No timeline. No escape clauses." Nola pulled him close. "Just two people who chose each other and keep choosing each other every single day." "That sounds terrifying." "It is. I'm in." Alistair kissed her, deep and sure. "On one condition." "What's that?" "Let me propose to you properly. The way I should have the first time." "Alistair, we're already married." "I don't care. I want to do it right. I want to ask you to marry me when you have every reason to say no, when there's no contract binding you, when it's just me and you and the choice." So he did. That night, in the 47th floor that had become their home, Alistair Coldwater got down on one knee and asked Nola to marry him. And Nola said yes. They renewed their vows in a small ceremony 6 months later. No cameras, no board members, no performance. Just family and the few friends they trusted. Rose Grayson cried through the entire thing. Marcus, who'd become something like family, stood as Alistair's best man. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Alistair looked at Nola the way he'd never looked at her during their first wedding, like she was his entire world. "I love you," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. In case that wasn't clear. "It's clear," Nola laughed through happy tears. "I love you too." They kissed to applause, no longer pretending, no longer afraid. That night, they returned to Coldwater Tower together. No fleeing to offices. No letters under doors. Just two people who'd found their way to each other through grief and fear and the courage to choose love anyway. Alistair carried her across the threshold of the penthouse, even though they'd lived there together for over a year. Nola laughed, her arms wrapped around his neck. "This is ridiculous. We're already home." "Humor me," he said, setting her down gently in the living room that no longer felt cold and empty. "I'm making up for lost time." And he was. Every day, in small ways and large ones, Alistair showed her that he'd meant every word of his new vows. He was learning to live without fear, to trust that loving her wouldn't destroy them both. 2 years after their contract wedding, Nola stood in the main living room of Coldwater Tower, looking out at the Chicago skyline. So much had changed. Her mother was in remission, living in a beautiful apartment 3 floors below theirs. Nola had returned to graduate school, studying social work with a focus on medical advocacy. Alistair had restructured his company's board, removing the faction that had enabled Bexley's schemes. They'd survived. More than that, they'd built something real. "What are you thinking about?" Alistair asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "That letter you wrote me. On our wedding night. God, that letter. I was such a coward." "No," Nola turned in his arms to face him. "You were terrified and trying to protect me the only way you knew how. I understand that now. I wasted so much time trying to keep you at a distance. We had a year. We have a lifetime now." She kissed him softly. "Besides, some things are worth the wait." Alistair smiled, that full, unguarded smile that still took her breath away. "I need to tell you something." "Should I be worried?" "That depends. How do you feel about expanding our family?" Nola's heart stuttered. "Alistair. I've been researching adoption agencies. I know we haven't talked about it much, but I thought, that is, if you wanted." He was nervous, she realized. Actually nervous about asking her this. "Yes," Nola said, before he could spiral further. "Yes? Yes. I want a family with you. However that looks." The relief on his face was palpable. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I never thought I'd get to have this. A real marriage. A family. A future that wasn't built on fear." "We both get to have it," Nola reminded him. "That's the point." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other as the city lights twinkled below. The contract that had brought them together was long since destroyed, replaced by something infinitely more binding, the choice to love each other, every single day. "Thank you," Alistair said quietly. "For what?" "For tearing up those divorce papers. For choosing me when you had every reason not to. For being brave enough to demand more than what I thought I could give." Nola pulled back to look at him. "Thank you for building me a home before you even knew you loved me. For protecting me even when you were trying not to care. For letting me in when everything in you wanted to run away." "I'm done running." "Good. Because I'm done letting you." Alistair laughed and kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they broke apart, he took her hand and led her toward the elevator. "Where are we going?" "The 47th floor. Our floor." He squeezed her hand. "I want to start planning. Nurseries and family dinners and all the chaos that comes with building a life together." "That sounds perfect." As the elevator rose, Nola thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago. Desperate, exhausted, signing a contract that felt like selling her soul. She'd thought she was trading her freedom for her mother's life. She'd thought she was entering a prison of marble and money. She'd been wrong. The contract had been a door, not a cage. And on the other side, she'd found a man who was just as lost as she was, just as afraid. Together, they'd found their way to something neither of them had believed was possible. Love. Real, messy, complicated, beautiful love. The elevator doors opened onto their private floor. Their home. Alistair pulled her inside, and Nola went willingly, ready for whatever came next. Because contracts could be broken. Security could fail. Money could disappear. But the choice to love someone, to stand beside them through fear and danger and uncertainty, that was unbreakable. That was forever. And Nola Coldwater, formerly Nola Grayson, who'd once signed her name on a contract that promised her nothing but money and protection, had found something worth infinitely more. She'd found home. 3 years later. Nola sat in the window seat on the 47th floor, a 3-month-old baby sleeping against her shoulder. Across the room, Alistair was on the floor with their 18-month-old daughter, building an elaborate tower of blocks that would inevitably be destroyed in approximately 30 seconds. "Dada, look!" Maya shrieked, pointing at the teetering structure. "I see it, sweetheart. Very impressive. Should we make it taller?" Maya's response was to slam both hands into the base of the tower, sending blocks flying. She collapsed into giggles. Alistair caught Nola's eye and grinned. "I have created a monster. You love it." "I really do." Rose appeared in the doorway, wiping flour from her hands. She'd been baking in the kitchen, a weekly tradition that filled the entire floor with the smell of cookies and bread. "How's my newest grandbaby doing?" she asked, coming to peer at the sleeping infant in Nola's arms. "Perfect. As always. Just like his mama." Rose kissed Nola's forehead. "I'm heading down to my place. Book club tonight. But I'll be back tomorrow for lunch." After Rose left, Alistair scooped up Maya and brought her over to the window seat, settling beside Nola with their daughter on his lap. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked. "That first night. The letter." "Sometimes. Usually when I'm sleep-deprived and wondering how we got here." Nola smiled. "Why?" "Because I keep waiting to wake up. For this to be a dream. For it to disappear. It's not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere." She shifted the baby carefully and leaned against Alistair's shoulder. "This is real. We're real." Maya yawned, snuggling into her father's chest. The baby stirred in Nola's arms but didn't wake. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered in the evening light. This was their life now. Not the cold, empty contract marriage that had started in fear and distance. But something warm and chaotic and filled with love. Alistair had been right about one thing: nothing good came easy. Their journey had been marked by danger and grief and the kind of fear that could break people. But they hadn't broken. They'd bent. They'd learned. They'd chosen each other, over and over again, until choosing each other became as natural as breathing. "I love you," Alistair said, kissing the top of Nola's head. In case that wasn't clear. Nola smiled, remembering him saying those exact words at their second wedding. "It's clear. I love you too." Maya had fallen asleep. The baby was peaceful. The evening stretched ahead of them, full of ordinary moments that had once seemed impossible. This was what they'd built from the ashes of a contract and the ruins of fear. This was what happened when two people decided that love was worth the risk. This was home. And it was everything. Loved this story? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more emotional romance stories that will keep you up at night. Drop a comment below and tell us, would you sign a contract marriage for love? What did you think of Alistair and Nola's journey? Your comments fuel our creativity and help us bring you more stories you'll love. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next upload. See you in the next story.